Hi, everyone. Welcome to Penn TV Election Night Results and Analysis. We are live on Facebook Live as well as YouTube. I'm your co-host, Kevin Mullen. We are thrilled to be joined by the Dean, the Professor, the Doctor, Melissa Michelson. It's great to see you. Melissa, she is with Menlo College, and she's here to help us break it all down. As you can see, from your screen. We do not have Mark Simon with us at this moment, but he is going to be joining us in just a little bit. He's actually out of the area on some family business, but he will be checking in because we have some very, very interesting, particularly interesting local results. We're going to certainly touch on the national race, which I know is giving some Democrats some concern, but this is an election unlike any we've seen in our lifetime, with a very large vote by mail ballot contingent out there among the states, and it may be weeks until we know the final numbers. In fact, we know for a fact it'll be weeks before we know the final numbers. But it looks like Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are the key states right now, and we'll talk to Melissa about that in just a bit. The U.S. Senate is hanging in the balance as well. You may notice, again, Mark Simon not with us, but he will be joining us through the power of Zoom technology, or if we can't get him on Zoom, we'll get him on the phone. We want to get his take on the results that are just now coming in from San Mateo County. And frankly, this is a bit of a surprise, a number of these results. So we're going to sort of walk through some of that tonight. But Melissa, welcome to Election Night. It is great to see you. This is going to be given this format without Mark as kind of our anchor and our rock, we have a somewhat limited production tonight. We probably will go for about an hour or so just talking about what we're seeing in the results. But Melissa, let's start with you. I know you are keenly aware of what's happening on the national level. And what is your mood at the moment as somebody who's watching these results closely?
Yeah, I would say my mood is, I'm having a bit of a flashback to 4 years ago when, there was a lot of optimism on the Democratic side that Hillary Clinton was going to get elected. And then some of the results weren't quite what Democrats expected. And that turned out to be a bad night for the Democrats and a win for Trump. And so there's some of that happening where some of the results aren't exactly what Democrats thought they would be seeing. Florida going very strongly Republican, very strongly for Trump pretty early on. And of course, there were some optimistic thoughts about what might happen in Texas and some other traditionally Republican states that really just aren't coming through. But, it's also very different because, as you noted, a lot of states are voting by mail. There's a lot of votes out there that will not be counted for some time to come. And really, the outcome of the presidency is not going to be known tonight, and it's going to take a while for all those votes to be counted. And so I think, we're in for a lot of people are going to be having some mental stress, refreshing their results pages quite often, I think, for the next few days.
Yeah. So we've heard so much about the early turnout, that Democrats were encouraged to vote early. But we also have a sense that because many of the states are, for the first time, really moving to a vote by mail kind of a model, driven by the pandemic, of course, that we find ourselves. Do you think that this blue wave that people keep talking about is actually materializing? It certainly materialized in the early numbers in terms of Democrats sending their ballots in. But are we going to really see a tidal wave of turnout? We had some very strong indications in California, certainly, that turnout was going to be very, very strong, as it is usually in presidential years, but really that this was probably going to be an exceptional kind of a year, just given the level of energy and all of the focus on voting. So do you think that is still going to materialize? And let's talk about nationally.
Yeah, I do. I think turnout's going to be really high, and I think it's really high on both sides, right? So Democrats were very enthusiastic about turning out as a referendum on the Trump administration, but I think we need to keep in mind that Republicans were also very motivated to turn out to support their party and to give Trump 4 more years. And so enthusiasm was really high on both sides, and I think we're going to see record turnout tonight.
Yeah. So, and there's just a reminder that this is 50 different elections happening. I mean, it certainly is a national election, but in terms of the administration of these elections, this is being done in states and being administered at the county level with the county registrars of voters. And there's lots of variation across the states in what those processes are. So there's been discussion that
there's states like Pennsylvania where a lot of folks voted early, turned in their mailed-in ballots or voted early, and those votes aren't counted early. Whereas in California, if you voted early, they went ahead and processed it and had your vote ready to release as soon as the polls were closed. And then we've also got some states where election officials are actually declining to even start counting those votes until some legal challenges are settled and they decide whether or not they're even going to open those ballots and even try to count them. So it's really very different in terms. So you can't just compare what you see in California to Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, because the way that local election officials are treating the ballots, the mailed-in ballots, is going to vary considerably.
Yeah, so my sense is that we need to be patient here, that the CNNs of the world and the MSNBCs of the world want to find some conclusion here, but the reality is this probably will trickle on for days, especially if the states are close, and clearly those swing states that I mentioned, Pennsylvania in particular, the so-called blue wall that Joe Biden needs to rebuild, of the upper industrial Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Certainly there are many indications. We're getting indications there of which way the wind is blowing, so to speak, but we really aren't going to know. It seems like we're not going to know with certainty. Of course, we're just now on the air at 8:30, and we're not going to be on until midnight. This is going to be a very abbreviated
well, it wouldn't be
version.
Any different. I think people who were around and who were watching the election returns 20 years ago might remember that sometimes this happens. Sometimes you actually don't know who's president for 36 days. Maybe this time it won't be quite so long. That would be preferable. But, we didn't know if it was going to be Bush or Gore for 36 days. I think memories have faded, but it's very much a possibility that it could take weeks.
Well, I think by about this time in 2016, when we had our live in-studio production on Channel 26, and we went for a full 4 hours, a very unusual setup, pre-pandemic. We, I think, had a sense, even at this time, that Donald Trump was going to be the president. And this one just feels like it's going to remain very much up in the air. So you are an astute watcher of the national scene. The U.S. Senate is hanging in the balance. I have been running around all afternoon and candidly have not been able to see virtually anything except the really expected results in terms of incumbent senators, for example, returning. I know that one of the Democratic incumbents, Doug Jones, will not be returning, that Tommy Tuberville, former football coach in Alabama, will be successful in his run there. But what are you seeing? Any surprises? Anything that sticks out to you other than, much like the presidential contest, we're probably going to need to wait on these results as well to get any kind of finality?
Well, we've got Hickenlooper in Colorado, so it looks like Cory Gardner is out. That's been called. I actually see pretty promising results for the Democrats in a couple of other states, particularly in Arizona. I think the story of the astronaut, Mark Kelly, has been a really strong one in Arizona. And of course, that state is also expected to go blue this year once all the votes are counted. And the early results from Maricopa County are very suggestive. So I think this is actually a good reminder for folks that Latinos in different states and with different national origins have very different political predispositions. So we've got a strong Cuban American population and some Venezuelan Americans in Florida that really pushed Miami-Dade over to the Trump column. But in Arizona, you're really talking about a very different Latino population, and they're going for Biden and Mark Kelly. So I think we're seeing that. I think it's too close to call some of the other races. I think there's a lot of hope on the Democratic side that Susan Collins will lose her seat in Maine, or that maybe Democrats will pick up a seat or two in Georgia. That's probably, actually, Georgia we're probably not going to know until January. I think Democrats, they picked up Colorado. I think they're going to pick up Arizona, and I think there's a chance they'll pick up one more. So the balance of the Senate is, again, it's going to be really close. And I seem to have lost you. I'm not sure what happened, or if I should keep talking. Oh no! Why can't I see you?
Yeah, so Melissa, I lost you as well. We're going to try to fix the technology here and see if we can't get back on. And I want to thank Rocky Robinson, by the way, at Penn TV for his great work. So Rocky's telling us we are still on. That's why we have Rocky talking to us in our ear. But neither Melissa or I can see each other. So
all right. Well, as long as it's still working, that's all that matters. I'm just staring at a black screen. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm staring at a black screen too, but that's okay.
It's fine. It's fine. So
most people tune into there we go. We're back. Most people tune into this broadcast. They can get the national stuff for the most part on CNN and MSNBC. Although I gotta say, Steve Kornacki and John King were just like just talking and talking and talking and just filling airtime. I got to hand it to those guys. It was pretty amazing. But people tune into us to find out what's going on locally. And I have to tell you right off the bat, I'm a 25-year politics watcher in San Mateo County, and there are definitely some results that this politics watcher did not expect. So I just want to very quickly touch on, and keeping in mind, these are vote by mail ballots that have come in. This is still a pretty strong indication of who's going to be successful or not. I just wanted to touch on a couple of surprises. We've got a San Mateo County school board, the Office of Education, the county school board. Chelsea Bonini is a challenger. She's challenging Rod Shao. Rod is a longtime incumbent. I know both of these individuals of high caliber. She's actually edging the incumbent 51% to 48% in the vote by mail returns. So it's unusual for an incumbent to be challenged, frankly, in San Mateo County. That result is definitely one to watch, and certainly too close to call, because we will have vote center ballots, vote center votes that will be tabulated and released at 9 p.m. and then every half an hour after that up until 11:30, I believe, tonight. So certainly one to watch. And then the San Mateo County Community College Board of Trustees, area number 3, actually pitted 2 incumbents from the Community College Board of Trustees against one another, because that district is transitioning to district elections. So it's triggered more political activity, frankly, than I've seen in a long time on that board. And in Area 3, Maurice Goodman, who happens to be a neighbor of mine here in South San Francisco and an incumbent, a former school board trustee on the South San Francisco Unified School District. He is currently leading another incumbent, Dave Mandelkern, 52% to 47%, and I'm giving you some rough numbers there. I'm not going to get into the decimal points. But Goodman leading early in Area 3. And in Area 5 of the San Mateo Community College Board of Trustees, John Pimentel is at 51%. Lisa Hicks-Demansky is at 43%. So that's 51% to 43%. It looks like he is in control there. And then we've got some interesting council races. And if you see me looking off to my left, your right, it's because I've got a monitor with both the California Secretary of State website up with some very preliminary numbers on statewide propositions, but also SMC Vote is the website for the San Mateo County Elections Office. So I'm sure anybody watching
I'm looking
this
at those too.
follow along there. And we've
Yeah,
got some
I'm looking at
interesting.
those too, and I think we should point out what's happening in Redwood City.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Talk
So
to us about that.
as
What are you seeing in Redwood City?
So Redwood City folks probably know that they also just switched to district elections because they were challenged by the fact that maybe they were in violation of the California Voting Rights Act because they had at-large elections, but only one Latino on the council, Alicia Aguirre, and a population that was 39% Latino, and so they divided the city up into districts, and now it looks like not only is Alicia going to get reelected, even though she's actually not in one of the two Latino majority districts that were drawn, but Rico Medina is gonna. Sorry, that's a different race. But maybe we're also going to get some other diversity on the council. We've got Michael Smith, who was running unopposed for the 4th district, getting election. So an African American getting elected. And then it's too close to call, but in the 3rd district, there's a really close 3-way race, and the top 2 candidates, Janet Borgens and Lizette Espinosa Garnica, are like neck and neck with half the ballots cast. So we'll see if, for me, the interesting story here is, did the switch to district elections actually mean that now Latinos are going to have more representation on the Redwood City Council, or will it turn out that that didn't really help, even though maybe we're going to see some more diversity here. So it's pretty exciting, right? This is what the California Voting Rights Act is supposed to do. It's supposed to lead to more members of historically marginalized communities winning election, and that seems to really be happening in Redwood City. The council is going to be far more diverse than it was before.
Yes, and we've talked about this dynamic a little bit, Melissa, where we've got the transition to district elections, but these are elections now happening concurrent with even year. So concurrent with presidential elections and gubernatorial elections, but then every voter is automatically getting a ballot, postage paid. So it might be a little easier to run. The barriers have been lowered because it's a smaller area, but you're also talking about a situation where every voter has a ballot, and you may have voters that are non-traditional municipal voters who are participating in a presidential cycle. So it really sort of raises the stakes for those candidates to talk to each and every one of those voters out there. So Redwood City, very interesting.
I mean, that's another pretty recent. Yeah, that's another pretty recent change to California law, right? Just a few years ago, a law went into place that said that cities had to move their municipal election to even year elections if their turnout was falling below a certain legal threshold. And political scientists have shown that historically marginalized communities are more likely to win election and be represented in on-year elections and even-year elections because there's higher turnout. And so it's a combination of all of these factors, right? It's higher participation because everyone's getting mailed a ballot. It's higher participation because it's an even-year election, especially this year. And because it's district election, the barriers to entry are much lower. And so we've got all these factors that are going to lead to more diverse representation in these municipal bodies, which I think is great considering, that's what California looks like.
That's right. And a few of the other cities that we're taking a look at. So in Foster City, we've got 2 incumbents. Sam Hindy is in first place with 24%. John Fruman, an appointed incumbent, is in second place. But Patrick Sullivan, who has run, I believe, 3 times prior to this, looks like he may, in fact, be successful. Now, again, it's very early. It's within 1 percentage point, within just about 200 votes between Patrick Sullivan, the challenger, and Catherine Mahanpour. She is an incumbent councilwoman, but one that I'm interested in, given that he has run before unsuccessfully, but thought that this really was his best shot, and he may prove to be a winner tonight. So we'll see what happens with that. Also in Half Moon Bay, an incumbent, Adam Eisen, who is, I believe, serving as the mayor right now, is trailing by about 20 percentage points. A small universe of voters in that smaller district in Half Moon Bay. but it looks like an incumbent is having some difficulty there. And on the issue of incumbents having some tough challenges, in my hometown of South San Francisco, James Coleman, a young, bright, Harvard-educated individual, is running very hard in a district. Rich Garbarino is a longtime incumbent, former colleague of mine. And in full disclosure, I was supporting him. But I was very impressed by James Coleman's campaign. He ran an aggressive grassroots campaign. He's actually leading by a percentage point right now in this early vote. Again, vote center votes will be coming in. The precincts will be reporting. We should have some updates in a matter of minutes. So that may be one that's simply too close to call. If you have something within a percentage point and you have a number of ballots that have been dropped off today that aren't going to be tabulated until tomorrow and in the coming days, it really is very difficult to call any particular race if it's that.
It's not just that it's one percentage point; it's 40 votes. So every vote counts, America. I mean, these races are very small. You're talking about dozens of votes. I think at the local level, it really can be obvious how much every vote matters, and we're all, focused on the White House and focused on Congress, but these little races, every vote really counts. So,
and on that score,
you're looking like 50... you're cruising to re-election. So, congratulations. You're looking good with these early results.
Thank you. And I've been watching Prop 18, which I authored. The numbers we have on the state level are very preliminary. That's why I haven't given any state ballot measure updates yet. That usually takes some time across the 58 counties, so we're not going to dwell too much on those results. But a couple of things that caught my eye as well, just on first blush here. Speaking of a small number of votes, only 58 votes separate Yu Shui and Anders Fung for the third spot. Millbury is going to be electing 3. Gina Pappin and Ann Schneider, the incumbents, pretty much cruising to re-election. It's really about that third spot. So that will definitely be one that's going to be watched. And then in San Mateo, Amarance Lee is an appointee to a vacated seat, faced a tough challenge by Lisa Diaz-Nash, a prominent community activist. And Amarance, we call her Ammo, she's up by 10 points right now over Lisa Diaz-Nash and looks to be in control. Diane Pappin, another Pappin, is in the top vote getter spot. So it's really an issue of who's going to be in that second spot. So definitely those are a few that caught my eye. And we're sort of scrambling just a little bit, trying to get our hands around these various issues. Sorry, I'm getting some breaking news on the text line here. I won't share quite yet. So the Caltrain measure RR, conveniently titled Measure RR. I've got some information that what's tricky about this one is it's a 3-county measure: San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. And there's I think one website where all of these votes are being aggregated because it needs to pass by 2/3 supermajority threshold across the 3 counties. So in aggregate. But San Francisco, not totally surprising, not reporting as of yet, I don't believe. But San Mateo County is over 73% yes. Again, it needs 66.67. I believe that's officially the 2/3 threshold. And in Santa Clara County, it's 68.7. So both in San Mateo and Santa Clara, it is above, in San Mateo's case, well above that 2/3 threshold. So very good sign for the Caltrain 1/8 cent sales tax measure. So that's the one regional measure that is on the ballot. And we will give you updates if we get any on that front. So, and I want to just, again, Rocky Robinson is helping us out considerably here with the technology. And he's going to be trying to get Mark Simon on the line. I would love to get Mark's initial reaction to what he is seeing in terms of some of these results. But I think what I might do is it looks like we're just 5 minutes away from the 9 p.m. update. I wanted to give sort of a full rundown of the city council races that we are paying attention to. But Melissa, anything else catching your eye? I wanted to before we go to the updated local results at 9 o'clock. I wanted to get a sense from you, just the tone and the tenor of this election cycle with your students. And to the extent you've been through a number of presidential cycles as a professor at Menlo College, were your students more energized this year than previous election cycles? Was it noticeable, or is it sort of par for the course? And maybe we've all talked ourselves into thinking that there's going to be a huge turnout and young people are going to be really energized. What was the actual case with your students?
Well, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we've been doing all of our teaching by Zoom this semester. And so really the students that I'm interacting with are the ones who have opted in to take political science. So I'm not necessarily interacting with the whole student body at Menlo College and not getting the sense of like, what's the sense among students who don't choose to take a political science class. But certainly in my class, interest is very high. Lots of students really, since Trump was elected, have had a renewed interest in political science and figuring out exactly how these election things work and what's going on. And I'd say the mood among most of my students was one of stress and concern about what would happen. And, all this talk about how there could be violence. They're seeing buildings being boarded up in downtowns. That there was really a lot of concern about how the next few days or maybe weeks might turn out. And then when we saw stories about things like the Trump trucks driving the Biden bus off the side of the road, or even here locally or in Maricopa County, Trump people having rallies that really seemed kind of intimidating. That's more what the students have been talking about, is how things seem really tense. And, they're really concerned about that and feeling unsafe. So it's a really stressful time. Didn't help that it was also midterms last week. We just really threw everything at the students all at once. But they've really been concerned.
So
Hey,
the breaking news I got is that we are joined by our anchorman, Mark Simon,
Awesome.
at an undisclosed location. But Mark, it is wonderful to see you, sir.
Thank you.
We hope that you are doing well and family's doing well. And we would love to get your take on what you are seeing. I was commenting to Melissa that we've been doing these election night shows for a while. There are definitely more surprises than I've seen in quite some time. And I think some of that might be attributable to the fact that, at least certainly on the statewide level, 21 million ballots out there, a real push to vote. Maybe some folks participating who are non-traditional voters, people that aren't normally moved to participate, which certainly injects an element of unpredictability when you're talking about local races that are sort of the lower profile kinds of races. But what are you seeing? First of all, on the local level, I want to get your take on what's happening more broadly. As our good friend Jimmy Kimmel said, as a good Democrat watching these national election results, he said, "This is like being awake during your own surgery." There's a lot of tension out there for Democrats right now, who have to just maybe hit the whiskey a little bit and relax and just sort of let this thing ride. But talk about the local stuff. That's why people would be tuning into us to get our take, given the level of interest we have and the focus on the local stuff. What are you seeing, Mark?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you. Thank you for going ahead. I'm really glad. Some personal stuff took me away. I couldn't stay away, as you can see, but I'm really glad that you guys went ahead, and I know you're doing a good job. Let me mention briefly what I've been seeing on the air. I think the best advice we can give everybody about the presidential race is just breathe. We're not going to know maybe till Friday. In some states, they haven't even begun counting the absentees or the mail-ins. All they're seeing, I just saw one precinct had reported in Nevada, it was Trump 91% and Biden 8.5. And I thought, well, that's it. I guess it's over. But there are a lot of votes to be counted. It's meaningful that tonight no one tried to declare victory, even Trump, who probably is having to be duct taped to his Lincoln bed to be able to not do that. But talking locally, I think you make a great point, Kevin. The turnout is like 20% higher. The number of people voting is like 20% higher than we're used to, at least the registered voters, which means there are a lot of people who showed up. Some people ran to the polling place. They've been waiting 4 years to cast a vote in this particular election. But you're right. It's a very long ballot. There's been a lot of consolidation of local elections with statewide elections. This is really the first year where all that really took hold. And there are tons, literally tons, I guess not literally, figuratively, tons of school boards and city council races. And you've got people voting who have never paid attention to these things because, they have a life. So it's,
Hey.
yeah, the rest of us are just hopeless geeks, Melissa. I'm sorry. So there were a number of surprises to me at the local level. I actually made a list of them because I knew I'd have to remember that we have a longtime incumbent, Rod Shao, on the County Board of Education, losing to Chelsea Bonini, who's part of this progressive democratic socialist insurgence that's taking place here in San Mateo County. She's one of the people who's been leading that effort. So that's a surprise that she won and won by enough that you don't need to worry about how many more votes are being counted. One of the other big surprises in Redwood City, in District 3, which is one of the majority districts, it's like 70% Latino. The votes there are very small. Everybody in every other district, you're seeing votes in the 1,500 to 2,000 range. In this race, it's like in the 600s. But Lisette Espinoza Garnica, who is self-described binary Latinx, you would think never ran for office before, unknown, taking on a very well-established incumbent in the district. She's in second place by 18 votes. Just amazing. And that one, we're going to have to wait till every vote is counted in that race. And even if she doesn't win, she has clearly established herself as a force in that district that's going to have to be reckoned with, not just in the next election, but she's going to represent a set of constituents that Janet Borgens is going to have to pay attention to should she win. So that was a big surprise to me. Another big surprise is San Mateo. Diane Pappin was an easily winner there. We all thought the race for the second seat was between Amarance Lee, an appointed incumbent, and Lisa Diaz-Nash, who sought the appointment, didn't get it, and ran a very vigorous campaign, well-funded, high-profile. But Amarance Lee is ahead by about 5,400 votes. So I was quite surprised that it was such an easy win. I thought Nash would show a lot stronger than that. There's some other races that are really interesting to follow in Millbrae. We've got a guy named Yo-Yo Wei running against a guy named Anders Fung, and they're separated by about 60 votes, 58 votes, too close to call. In Foster City, Patrick Sullivan, who is the very definition on the peninsula of a perennial candidate, right now is in third place in a race for 3 seats. But he's been that close before. He's ahead of incumbent Catherine Mahanapour. He's been that close before and ended up all the votes being counted, him not winning. So that's still a possibility, I suppose. One of the other interesting ones to me was very high-profile campaign against Congresswoman Anna Eshoo by a Democrat named Rishi Kumar. Since we went to the open primary, this is one of the only races where there were 2 Democrats running against each other. Ran a very vigorous campaign, but she's beating him 2-1 in both counties. So there's no reason to think that that's going to, and she's getting about 60-something% of the vote, 66, 67. She normally gets around 68, 69. So it doesn't look like he put a real dent in her. I see Kevin Mullen got 80% of the vote. That's not a bad turnout.
Yeah, that guy's doing okay.
He's doing all right.
And it looks like Becker will be the new state senator. Looks like Mark Berman's doing okay. So, some of the usual suspects cruising a re-election. At least we have some results that we can feel fairly confident about.
Yeah, I don't think the late vote counts are going to change that much.
Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised to see Lisa Petrides getting 80% of the vote on the community college district. This is the race where Eugene Whitlock dropped out of the race very late, and I was worried he could still win. He could still get enough votes to win. That doesn't look like that's going to happen. District elections is really one of the stories today. You've got two incumbents, Maurice Goodman running against Dave Mandelkern. Goodman's ahead by almost 2,000 votes, which I would think means he's going to win. In the other one, John Pimentel spent more than $200,000 of his own money to win a community college district seat. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of money to spend when you're on the community college. So those are some of my high, racing through the ballot, sort of look at the local stuff. I was surprised at some of the statewide measures. I didn't really think 15 would pass, but I thought it might do a little better than it did. I was surprised, Kevin, that your measure, Prop 18, didn't pass, at least with about 20% of the vote counted. So maybe that's still very much in the game.
Yeah, come on, that's just wild speculation there, Mark. With 20% of the vote counted, give him a few minutes to count some more ballots before we say Prop 18 didn't pass. Give him a minute.
We're going to wait on the props. We're going to wait on the state props. Given,
I know you want to give the viewers some content, but come on, it's not enough.
We're going to wait on the prop. We're going to wait on the props until sometime in December.
Quite possible.
Wait
I mean,
or not,
some of them are way ahead. Prop 17's way ahead by like 1.5 million votes. Maybe there you can make a prediction, but some of these other ones, I feel like they're awfully close.
And Prop 22, the one, the Uber Lyft ballot measure, that's well ahead as well. And that's notable because it was the most expensive campaign in the state's history. And it looks like...
And actually, Prop 23 shows the biggest margin, which is interesting. So a strong no on that one. It's surprising that Prop 22 got a yes.
700 million spent and counting. That's actually an outdated figure. We're probably up around 800 million, but just Prop 22 alone was in the hundreds of millions. And, the labor community mounted a strong defense of that. What's very hard to tell, though, so we got 35, unless we have an update here, we've got about 35% of the vote counted. And, you certainly have an indication of what's going to be tight, but it is hard to know where these votes are coming from. And with the turnout the way it is, there are a lot of votes that were dropped off at vote centers across the state that have yet to be tabulated. Registrars have up to 17 days to count ballots, as long as they're postmarked by election day or were properly dropped off in a vote center mailbox. So it remains to be seen on that front. I just wanted to make a quick note on the local level. Measures Y and R in the city of San Mateo having to do with height and density. Measure Y, if it passed, the city council would not be able to increase the current height and density limits without voter approval for 10 years. And that Measure Y is currently passing by a slim, it's losing by a slim margin, a little over 51% to almost 49%. So very close, but the no is prevailing at the moment. And Measure R also is losing. Measure R, if this were to pass, the council through the general plan update process could increase heights and residential density limits in certain areas designated by that measure. So at this point, no is leading for both Y and R. And Mark, you should know, you probably have a lead on this. The San Francisco numbers just came in for Caltrain, and it's at 74.7% on the 1/8 cent sales tax. So San Francisco's numbers are in. San Mateo County's numbers are in, at least the early vote, as well as Santa Clara. So in all three counties, it is well above the 2/3 threshold. So it looks like this high voter turnout in the Bay Area is certainly going to help, at least in those three counties, for that 1/8 cent sales tax measure. Mark, you're a Caltrain veteran. I know that this is a long time coming to see this actually prevail, and it certainly looks like it is going to tonight.
Yeah, I do want to talk about RR, but I think I want to go back to R and Y and San Mateo. Melissa, you were, I thought you had some thoughts on
Can we pause there for a minute? Well, I think it's interesting. What I think this is telling us, at least from the early results, is that people really don't want to have these restrictions on housing loosened. And so, everyone's always talking about how difficult it is to find affordable housing, how there's not enough affordable housing in California, and yet when there's a measure on the ballot to change the zoning rules, to the height restrictions, to maybe make it easier for some housing to get built, they're saying no, at least so far. And so it's the kind of NIMBYism that we come to expect, but it's, I feel a bit frustrating that on one side of their mouth, people are complaining about the housing crunch and housing prices, and on the other side of their mouth, they vote no on measures that might make a difference and change the situation. So.
Well, it's one of those truisms that everybody believes more housing should be built, and it should be built somewhere else. So, in this case, I actually thought Measure R and Y might both fail. The fact is, as a practical matter, it's the kind of issue a city council ought to deal with. You really can't do planning, development planning on the ballot in that way. This measure, the height limit that Measure Y was seeking to extend, is 30 years old now. And 30 years ago, the city council approved a massive development on El Camino that prompted the neighbors, the residents of the city, to do this. And in fact, one of the residents who was one of the leaders was Jerry Hill, and it's what launched his political career, which is actually coming to an end tonight, sort of. I guess he gets another month, but
he might run for something else. It's crazy. Come on, don't throw him out. He's just getting termed out of one office. Give the man a chance.
My gut tells me he's ready to stop. Yeah, my gut tells me he's ready to stop reading analyses of legislation.
All right,
and so I think. I think it's a different city now than it was certainly 30 years ago, and I think that there is support for doing something if it's thoughtful. And what I see this is as much. I see a number of some of these ballot measures, for example, the statewide props. I think you're going to see people essentially saying, "Don't bring these to me. There are places where these decisions should be made. Make them there," and that includes the special interests who don't like the decisions that are made at a legislative body, and so they go ahead and put these measures on the ballot. As for RR, I worked there for 15 years. The whole time, every year it was, are we going to balance the budget this year, and how? And it was always, an exercise in voodoo. And we actually coined the phrase while I was there: Caltrain needs a permanent, dedicated source of funding. And I was looking at some other media, and it looks like when you average everything out, it's about 70%, which is well above the 67%, a more resounding win than I thought it would be. I think it was helped by a very well-run campaign that really emphasized how important Caltrain is. People love Caltrain, even if they don't use it. They love the idea of it. They love the sentiment behind it. People love trains anyway. I mean, I learned that, there's an expression we use for people who are train advocates. We call them foamers because they foam at the mouth when they start talking about trains. So I think the train is popular, and there was no organized opposition. And so I'm not surprised. There is a huge political fight on that board that was sort of put on hold while this measure went forward. And it's a big win for Dave Pine, who loaned the campaign at the last minute $500,000 of his own money, because I'm sure he saw polling that showed it was close. So that gives him a little cachet on the board, I think, that he might not have had before. Kevin,
Mark,
that will continue to be a... You have long been an advocate for Caltrain, and I got to tell people, when I was working there and we needed to go to somebody who could start trying to build consensus among our legislative body, I always went to Kevin first, partly because he just has trouble saying no to people. And we like that about him. But what do you think about Measure R? Are you surprised it was passing this easily?
Well, I appreciate the kind comment, Mark. I'm not surprised that it's passing. I might be surprised at the margin. It's got a solid 5 points. You know, a supermajority is a difficult threshold under the best of circumstances. And I would say a presidential year turnout, it was strategically the right play to make to really force this issue and get this onto this high turnout ballot. Especially given the importance of that system when the economic recovery happens. I think it was a well-run campaign, not a very strong opposition, not a funded opposition. But when the economy is in the state that it's in, it's always tricky to go to the ballot and get voter approval. But this really was the right ballot with the right kind of a turnout model. So I'm very happy for Dave Pine. I'm happy for the board. There will be some very difficult conversations around governance. This was a little bit of a tortured path for this measure to actually get to the ballot because there were issues with San Francisco and Santa Clara County looking at maybe what they would consider to be San Mateo County's control of the system. We're not going to debate that here on the show, but I know that this portends a number of conversations that will happen, maybe some of them in the legislature itself on governance, and is there some kind of modified approach, maybe a regional rail entity of some type. You know, we have so many different transit agencies in this Bay Area of ours. So more to come on all of that, but in terms of tonight's news, with Jim Hartnett running that railroad, this is a big night for those folks in San Carlos who run this train system. So I'm very happy for them, and I'm happy for the commuters of the San Francisco Peninsula. This is the backbone system and crucial to the economic well-being of this area. So excited for them.
Let me ask each of you. I ran real quick through a lot of the local measures, races. Anything you see in terms of what might be on the minds of voters or how they voted this time? And, there were a number of places where incumbents are in some trouble. The one that still blows my mind is the district race in Redwood City, where a really hard-working incumbent is facing a real serious challenge that we don't know how that's going to turn out. But any flavor you got for what might be on the minds of voters? Melissa, let me start with you and your sense of what sort of voters were showing up today and what you think might have been on their minds, especially when it comes to the local measures, local races.
I think most people really weren't thinking about the local races. I think they were thinking about Trump and Biden. They're thinking maybe about some of these statewide ballot propositions, but really was not in their radar, not on their radar, that they were going to have to make these decisions about these local races, or even that it was, that they would have to do that homework. So obviously that's an advantage of everyone being mailed a ballot is, they vote for the stuff at the top and then they're like, oh, wow, I gotta vote for that too. I didn't even know that was happening. Let me Google that. Let me do some work. But it means that people probably hadn't put a lot of thought into it. And so I think what you do see in those cases is people relying on heuristics. Maybe they're looking at the likely gender of a candidate. They're looking at what the name tells them about their likely race or ethnicity. Or maybe they're just thinking about maybe some signs they've seen in the neighborhood when they've gone for a walk. And so probably there's a lot of last minute decision making being made on these. And I think that could be why, especially in places like Redwood City, where you now have these districts that have been drawn to give the Latino community 2 districts, or other places where people are making decisions based on very little information. That's why, in large part, we've moved to even year elections and we've moved to district elections so that historically marginalized communities are more likely to get representation. And then when there's somebody running who shares that identity, that gives them a boost. And so it's not necessarily that people are going into the voting booth, for example, for District 3 in Redwood City, I'm thinking, oh, Janet Borgens, she's been my council member, but, well, Lizette Espinosa Garnica, that sounds like somebody who I would agree with. That sounds like somebody like me, who's Latino. They're probably not making the decision based on Janet's reputation or her voting history. People probably didn't even realize anything she had done, right? So I just think, especially when all the noise, all the attention is on this big, shiny presidential election and on these big state propositions like 22, which with all that money has really just been hitting people over the head repeatedly with ads, you know, these council members, they can barely get your attention. So I guess I'm not as surprised as you are by some of these results, because I think people are just kind of like, oh my gosh, there's more to vote on. Sure, that person sounds good, and not necessarily, you know, really doing a lot of work.
Kevin, let me ask you the same question. I blew right by one of the more interesting races. Rich Garbarino in South San Francisco is trailing right now. This is a guy who is widely liked everywhere in the county. He's just a well-regarded guy, but he took, had a tough challenger. So there's another example of an outcome that you would not have predicted in a normal election year. What's your take on what?
Well, that one's
what
super
the message?
close. Come on.
What?
Like, that one's like 13 votes or something. It's like
I know,
17 votes.
but that's the point. My point isn't that it's close and he might still win, but he's a well-regarded incumbent who should be winning easily. The fact that he's facing a tough race, even if he ends up winning it, same with Janet Borgens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
We don't know how those races are going to turn out, but this is a guy who's a likable guy, who's liked by everybody, and he's facing a tough re-election.
Yeah.
What's your take, Kevin?
I would say, Mark, I'm surprised that it's this close. I'm not surprised that it's competitive. Having talked to James Coleman, I know that he was out there even during a pandemic working the grassroots, working very hard. He had a number of volunteers doing lit drops and those kinds of things. He was hungry. It is interesting, the district election dynamic, and it'll probably take a number of cycles for us to really sort of get our hands around this. But Rich Garbarino, popular incumbent, longtime incumbent. If this were a citywide race, is that a different dynamic altogether yet again? This is a condensed, smaller area that can be walked, frankly, a couple of times. Even if folks aren't opening their door in a pandemic, you're hitting the streets. You're able to get to those homes as a challenger. And I think he ran a very spirited challenge. I expected that Garbarino probably would prevail given his popularity and longtime service. But these are the things that happen in an election. If you have a longtime incumbent, you sort of make, I think, some assumptions about what the results might be. But then you also have the on-the-ground dynamic of somebody really out there hustling quite a bit. But again, it's... there are a number of votes that are going to be tabulated after tonight. Votes that, I was on Grand Avenue in South City picking up my burritos for the night. And there was somebody walking 4 ballots up to drop it in at the official mail drop at City Hall. I mean, these are all votes that are going to be tabulated in the coming days and weeks. So we don't know, but in talking with James Coleman, I was impressed by him and knew that he would be competitive. But candidly, I didn't think he would be able to knock off a popular incumbent like Rich Garbarino. But remains to be seen. But I think competitive races are a good thing for a community. You want younger people coming through the ranks, taking a shot. It's good for democracy. It keeps longtime incumbents on their toes, so to speak, and in touch with the people and in touch with their neighborhoods. But the district election dynamic in a presidential year, that nexus there, I think, will keep political scientists busy trying to study the effects when you have something like this, because you are seeing some, frankly, unexpected outcomes on a night like this.
I think we're seeing a couple of things. One is, and I think it's the result of a couple of critical political reforms that took place and really began to take hold of district elections And a lot of cities adopted spending limits. When you put that hand in glove with district elections, somebody can go door to door and really affect the outcome. We had a number of new faces, almost new generation faces running this time, young people. And I think we can expect to hear and see more of them. James Coleman's a good example of someone you can probably expect to hear from again. So I think you saw in a number of places people getting started. Melissa can confirm this, so can you, Kevin. Many times somebody who wins an office loses the first time. It's just something that happens because you don't really know all you need to know, and you learn more from losing than you do from winning. The only other analysis I'd offer up, and then I'll get out of the way and let you guys continue with the show. I think there are some people who won tonight who we can expect to see run for other offices. Davina Hurt did very, very well in Belmont and really sort of established a name for herself, I think, as someone to watch. Diane Pappin, I think, had always been thought of as somebody who you could look for to run for another office. She won easily in San Mateo. And I think Ambrose Lee represents a new sort of diverse face of this county. The county's changing. We're seeing the end of dominance of our politics and our national politics, no matter how the national election turns out. We're seeing, the slow ringing down of the curtain on the dominance of white males in American politics. In San Mateo County, as you would expect, is ahead of the curve. I've mentioned 3 women, 2 of whom are minorities, and that's just the way it is in this county. And the other person I think we're going to have to keep an eye on is John Pimentel, who won not by as much as he probably thought he would on the community college, but if you're willing to pump $200,000 of your own money into a community college race, I think that we haven't heard the last of him, and that this isn't the only job he's interested in. Listen, it was great to parachute in and stir up the pot and then get the hell out. So I'm glad you guys are doing this. It's always an honor and a privilege and a joy to be with you. So thanks for letting me pop in here.
Hey, honor to
Thanks,
be
Mark.
share the Zoom call with you, Mark, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of these election night shows. It's a real joy for me, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And Melissa, our plan was to only go for an hour, and we are coming up right on the hour. So why don't we make sure we thank Rocky Robinson for getting us all hooked up and getting us going on Facebook Live and YouTube. Thank you, Rocky, for everything you do. Election results will continue to be updated on SMC Vote. If you type that into your Google, SMC Vote, that will drive you to the San Mateo County elections page. And then for the statewide propositions, CASOS, the Secretary of State's website, California Secretary of State, and it's fairly easy to get to that link. You can get the updates there. So, Melissa, Dr. Michelson, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Kevin.
And,
that was really fun.
And I know that it's going to be days and weeks probably before we know the results here. So we know that we'll have an upcoming game show, not game show, a showing, a programming of the game.
We could make it a game show. Let's make it interesting. Yes, and once we have real results.
There you go. Featuring, the 3 of us. And we'll be doing another round of analysis when we actually have some final results and can digest all of that. So with that, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Penn TV's abbreviated election night analysis program. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.